What if Constantinople never fell? How one city could have changed the entire modern world. It is the 29th of May, 1453. Dawn has not yet broken over the Bosphorus, but the darkness is already alive with thunder. The great Urbana cannons, each barrel cast wide enough for a grown man to crawl inside, have been firing without pause for 53 days. The walls of Constantinople, walls that have stood for over 1,000 years, walls that have repelled Huns and Arabs and Bulgars and Vikings, are finally beginning to crack. Entire sections of ancient stone have collapsed into rubble. The defenders, fewer than 8,000 men facing an Ottoman army that numbered perhaps 100,000, have patched the breaches with timber and earth in sheer desperation. They have done this for 7 weeks. Inside the city, Emperor Constantine XI has already said his goodbyes. He has received communion. He has asked forgiveness of any man he has wronged. He knows what is coming. Every person inside these walls knows what is coming. And then the final assault begins. The Ottoman infantry surge through the pre-dawn darkness. The defenders fight with everything they have. For a moment, for a single breathless moment, the walls hold. But what if they had continued to hold? What if, on the morning that would have been the Roman Empire's last, something shifted? What if the walls did not fall? What if the Eastern Roman Empire, the living, breathing successor to Caesar and Augustus and Justinian, survived the 15th century? Would the Ottoman Empire still rise to dominate the Mediterranean? Would the Renaissance unfold as it did? Would Christopher Columbus ever sail west? Would the modern world, with its borders, its religions, its balance of power, look anything like it does today? These are not idle questions. History, as we will discover, moves on hinges. And few hinges have ever been as consequential as the one that swung open on that terrible morning in May of 1453. To understand how differently things might have gone, we must first understand what was actually at stake. Constantinople was not simply a city. It was the idea of Rome made physical. Founded by Emperor Constantine the Great in 330 AD on a peninsula commanding the narrow strait between Europe and Asia, it had been the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire for over 11 centuries. While the Western Roman Empire crumbled in 476 AD, the East endured. Its people called themselves Romans. Its emperor traced his authority in unbroken succession back to Augustus himself. By 1453, that empire had been reduced to a shadow of itself, little more than the city and a few scattered territories. A century of plague, civil war, and relentless pressure from the emerging Ottoman state had stripped away almost everything. But the city itself remained. Its legendary Theodosian walls, triple-layered, studded with towers, stretching nearly 4 miles across the neck of the peninsula, had never been taken by force from outside. Even in decline, Constantinople was considered essentially impregnable. The young Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II disagreed. 21 years old and burning with ambition, Mehmed had spent years preparing for this moment. He commissioned the Urbana cannon specifically to reduce those walls. He blockaded the Bosphorus. He even had his ships dragged overland on greased wooden runners to bypass the chain the Byzantines had stretched across the Golden Horn Harbor. It was a campaign of extraordinary energy and innovation. The siege lasted 53 days. The defenders fought with desperate courage, reinforced by a small contingent of Genoese soldiers led by a commander named Giovanni Giustiniani. For weeks, every Ottoman assault was repulsed. But on the night of the 28th of May, Giustiniani was struck by a crossbow bolt and carried from the walls. His men, demoralized, began to waver. And in the pre-dawn hours of May the 29th, a small gate in the walls, the Kerkoporta, was left unlatched. Ottoman soldiers discovered it, poured through, and the defense collapsed from within. By noon, it was over. Constantine XI died fighting, his body never identified with certainty. Mehmed rode into the city and stood inside the Hagia Sophia, the greatest church in the Christian world, before the day was out. The Roman Empire, in that moment, ended. Or did it? History does not turn on grand forces alone. It turns on individuals, on accidents, on small decisions made under enormous pressure. And in the final hours of Constantinople's defense, there were several moments where things could, plausibly, credibly, have gone differently. Let us construct our alternate timeline carefully, because if we are to take this exercise seriously, we must build it on real historical possibilities. Consider this convergence. Giustiniani in our alternate timeline is not struck by the crossbow bolt. Perhaps he steps aside at the wrong moment, or perhaps the bolt finds a gap in someone else's armor. He remains on the walls, rallying his Genoese soldiers through the night. The Kerkoporta gate is noticed by a sharp-eyed Byzantine officer, latched and reinforced before any Ottoman scout discovers it. And, critically, 2 Venetian galleys that in real history arrived just days after the fall, part of a relief force that had been delayed by storms, reached the harbor on the evening of May the 28th, carrying 100 fresh soldiers and, more importantly, the news that a larger Christian fleet is only weeks behind. Mehmed launches his final assault anyway. The stakes are too high to stop now. The Ottoman army is enormous. The momentum is overwhelming. But the walls hold through the night. And in the early morning light, as Ottoman casualties mount and the defenders demonstrate for the first time in weeks that they can not only resist but counterattack, something begins to shift in the Ottoman camp. Mehmed's officers begin whispering. His Janissary commanders report staggering losses. His artillery is exhausted, several cannon barrels cracked from overuse. And word arrives that the Ottoman siege camp has been raided on its eastern flank by a Byzantine cavalry sortie, a desperate, brilliant maneuver that destroys supply wagons and sets fire to 2 ammunition stores. By dawn on May the 30th, in this alternate history, Mehmed II calls off the assault. He does not retreat in shame. He is too careful a strategist for that. He withdraws to negotiate, presenting the withdrawal as a tactical pause. But everyone in Europe and everyone in the Ottoman court understands what has happened. Constantinople has survived, and nothing will ever be quite the same again. The news reaches Rome first, carried by Venetian merchants. Then it spreads across Italy, north into the Holy Roman Empire, west through France and Spain, east through Hungary and Poland. Church bells ring, Te Deums are sung. In cities across the Christian world, the survival of Constantinople is treated as a miracle. It is difficult to overstate how significant this moment would have felt to contemporaries. For decades, the fall of Constantinople had been considered inevitable by Western observers and dreaded accordingly. The city was, in the Christian imagination, the ultimate bulwark, the last Roman emperor, the guardian of ancient civilization. When in our own history the city did fall, the grief in Western Europe was profound. Pope Nicholas V reportedly wept. Aeneas Silvius Piccolomini, who would soon become Pope Pius II, wrote that this was the death of Homer and Plato themselves. In our alternate timeline, that grief never arrives. Instead, there is jubilation. And jubilation in the 15th century has political consequences. Almost immediately calls for a new crusade begin, not the half-hearted, constantly delayed crusade proposals that had been circulating for decades, but something with genuine momentum. The survival of Constantinople has demonstrated that the Ottomans are not invincible. Mehmed II, a young sultan who staked enormous prestige on taking the city, has failed. The psychological damage to Ottoman expansion could hardly be overstated. Pope Nicholas V, energized and emboldened, begins organizing a broad Christian coalition. Venice and Genoa, who had commercial empires dependent on Constantinople and its trade routes, throw their considerable financial weight behind the effort. Hungary's formidable military commander, John Hunyadi, who had already dealt Mehmed a stunning defeat at the Battle of Belgrade just 3 years before, becomes the hero of the moment. Plans begin to take shape not merely to defend Constantinople, but to push the Ottomans back. Europe, for the first time in a generation, is unified around a common cause. For Mehmed II, the failure at Constantinople is catastrophic, not militarily, not immediately, but politically. The young sultan had built his entire legitimacy on the promise of taking the city. From the moment he came to power, Constantinople had been his stated destiny. He had reorganized the Ottoman military around this objective. He had commissioned extraordinary engineering feats, the Urbana cannon, the sea transport across land, all in service of this singular goal. His identity as a ruler was inseparable from the fall of the Roman capital. He returns to Edirne without it. The consequences within the Ottoman court are swift and severe. Rival factions, nobles who resented Mehmed's centralization of power, religious figures who questioned his methods, older commanders who felt sidelined during the siege, all find their voices strengthened. It is possible, historians might argue, that Mehmed faces a genuine challenge to his authority in the months following the failure. Perhaps not an outright revolt, he is still too strong and too shrewd for that, but a serious erosion of the unquestioned dominance he had been building. Ottoman expansion does not stop. That would be too dramatic a conclusion. The empire retains enormous resources and military capability. The Balkans remain under pressure. Anatolia remains firmly in Ottoman hands. But the specific brilliant momentum that Mehmed carried, the sense of inexorable divine favor, the mythology of the Sultan destined to take Rome, is punctured. Perhaps the most significant consequences in southeastern Europe. In our own history, the fall of Constantinople opened the road for rapid Ottoman expansion into the Balkans and Hungary. Here, with a Byzantine state still standing at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, and with a newly energized Christian military coalition in the field, that expansion is slower, more contested, more costly. Serbia and Bosnia and Albania hold longer. The Hungarian frontier becomes a genuine stalemate rather than a slow retreat. It is also possible, and historians would certainly debate this, that Mehmed's internal troubles accelerate the role of the Janissaries in Ottoman politics. The military elite that made Ottoman power possible also had the capacity to unmake sultans who failed them. Whether Mehmed survives this crisis of legitimacy intact, or whether he is forced into concessions that permanently limit the sultan's authority, is a question without a clean answer. But the Ottoman Empire of 1460 in this alternate world is a different creature from the one we know, still powerful, still dangerous, but no longer an unstoppable force reshaping the entire Eastern Mediterranean. The Eastern Roman Empire has survived, but survival is not the same as revival. The Byzantine state of 1453, even in triumph, controls little more than Constantinople, a few islands, and a coastal strip of the Peloponnese. Its population is a fraction of what it was in the empire's glory days. Its treasury is nearly empty. Its army, even reinforced by Venetian and Genoese troops, numbers in the thousands rather than the tens of thousands. What happens next depends enormously on whether Western Europe's post-siege generosity translates into sustained material support, or whether, as so often in Byzantine history, the enthusiasm fades once the immediate crisis has passed. Let us assume, reasonably given the political climate we have described, that significant support does materialize. Venice and Genoa, whose commercial interests in the Black Sea trade routes are directly dependent on Constantinople's survival, invest heavily in the city's reconstruction. The Pope facilitates a financial package that brings in funds from across Catholic Europe. A military alliance, though imperfect and fractious, provides a buffer against further Ottoman aggression for at least a decade. Constantine XI, alive in this timeline, his survival itself a cause for celebration, proves to be a capable administrator in peacetime, though the challenges he faces are immense. The city needs population, it needs industry, it needs a tax base. The flow of Italian merchants and craftsmen that follows the defense creates a cosmopolitan commercial energy, but it also creates tension with the Greek Orthodox population who resent the growing Latin influence in their ancient capital. Perhaps the most realistic vision of Byzantium's second chance is not a restored empire in the ancient sense, but rather something resembling what Venice was in this period, a wealthy, sophisticated, commercially powerful city-state with imperial ambitions it can no longer fully realize, but with the intellectual and cultural capital to punch far above its political weight. Constantinople is the crossroads of East and West. Constantinople is banker and broker and archivist and diplomat. That, perhaps, is the most plausible Byzantine future, not a new Justinian, not the reconquest of Anatolia, but a remarkable transformation from dying empire to thriving city-state at the heart of a new Mediterranean order. In our own history, one of the most significant consequences of Constantinople's fall was the movement of Greek scholars westward. Men like George Gemistos Plethon, Cardinal Bessarion, and dozens of their colleagues brought ancient Greek manuscripts, many unknown in the West for centuries, into the libraries and courts of Italy. This infusion of texts and ideas is widely credited with accelerating the Italian Renaissance. The rediscovery of Plato, the recovery of Greek science, the humanist revolution, all of these have roots, in part, in the Byzantine diaspora. In our alternate timeline, that diaspora does not occur, at least not in the same form. The scholars stay in Constantinople. The manuscripts remain in their libraries. The intellectual life of the Byzantine capital continues, now perhaps enriched by the Italian merchants and artists who flood in after the siege. Constantinople itself becomes a Renaissance city, a place where Greek philosophy and Latin humanism meet, where Orthodox theology debates with Catholic scholasticism, where the ancient world and the emerging modern world collide in real time. Does Italy still have its Renaissance? Almost certainly, though perhaps with different emphasis and different timelines. The humanist movement was already well underway in Florence and Rome before 1453. Petrarch had been dead for 80 years. Brunelleschi's dome was already standing. The Italian Renaissance was not solely dependent on Byzantine refugees, but it was enriched by them in ways that are difficult to fully separate from the intellectual history of the period. What changes, perhaps most profoundly, is the geography of ideas. In our world, the Renaissance was overwhelmingly a Western European phenomenon, with Greek learning filtered through Italian intermediaries. In this alternate world, Constantinople itself becomes a Renaissance center. The flow of knowledge runs east to west and west to east simultaneously. A scholar in Florence corresponds directly with a scholar at the court of Constantine XI. An artist in Venice travels to Constantinople to study ancient mosaics still intact in their original setting rather than described in manuscripts. The intellectual consequences of this shift could be enormous and impossible to fully map. But the essential insight is this: in a world where Constantinople survives, the Renaissance does not disappear. It simply looks different, and perhaps richer for it. Here we arrive at one of the most common questions asked about this alternate history, and one of the most complicated to answer. In our own timeline, Columbus's voyage of 1492 was driven in significant part by the need to find an alternative sea route to Asia. The Ottoman conquest of Constantinople had, over the following decades, complicated and eventually transformed overland trade routes between Europe and the East. The Silk Road did not close. That is a simplification. But Ottoman control over key transit points gave the empire significant leverage over the spice trade, and European merchants were motivated to seek routes that bypassed Ottoman territory entirely. This imperative drove Portuguese exploration down the African coast, and eventually Spanish sponsorship of Columbus's transatlantic gamble. In our alternate world, does this imperative still exist? The answer is partially. Constantinople's survival means the crossroads of trade between Europe and Asia remains in Byzantine, and therefore, given the commercial arrangements in place, effectively Venetian and Genoese hands. The spice trade flows more freely. The price pressure that motivated Atlantic exploration is somewhat reduced. But the Portuguese exploration of Africa was driven by more than spice economics. It was driven by genuine curiosity, by missionary ambition, by the dream of reaching India by sea regardless of overland alternatives. Vasco da Gama's voyage to India in 1498 might be delayed by years in this alternate timeline, or it might happen on almost the same schedule if Portuguese incentives remain strong enough. Columbus himself is harder to assess. His specific proposal, sailing west to reach Asia, was premised on geographical miscalculations that any competent cosmographer of the period recognized. Spain agreed to sponsor him in 1492, in part because the political moment was right. The Reconquista had just concluded. The monarchy was flush with victory and ambition, and the prospect of cutting out Ottoman and Venetian middlemen in the spice trade was attractive. In a world where Constantinople stands and trade routes are more open, does Spain still find Columbus's proposal compelling? It is possible that the Americas are discovered later, perhaps by a decade, perhaps by a generation. It is also possible that the first European contact comes from Portugal rather than Spain following the African route, or, eventually, by accident from Atlantic fishing grounds. What seems unlikely is that the Americas remain undiscovered into the 16th century. The age of exploration was too deeply rooted in European ambition, curiosity, and competition to have been entirely contingent on the fall of one city. But the timing matters. A decade's delay in European contact with the Americas is the difference between the Aztec Empire at its height and the Aztec Empire weakened by internal revolt. It is the difference between different European powers making first contact, with all the consequences that flow from that. History, as always, rhymes rather than repeats. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 had profound consequences for the religious geography of the Christian world. With the Byzantine emperor gone, the Eastern Orthodox Church lost its political patron. The Patriarch of Constantinople found himself a subject of the Ottoman Sultan, a relationship that would persist, awkwardly and sometimes tragically, for centuries. In the absence of a Roman emperor in the East, Moscow began to style itself the Third Rome, the true heir of Christian imperial authority. In our alternate timeline, none of this happens. Constantine XI remains emperor. The Byzantine court remains the political center of Eastern Orthodoxy. The Patriarch answers to an Orthodox Christian sovereign. The entire logic of Moscow's imperial pretension that it has inherited the mantle of fallen Constantinople never materializes because Constantinople has not fallen. The consequences for Russia are potentially enormous. The ideology of Moscow as the Third Rome was not merely a theological curiosity. It was the foundation of Russian imperial ambition, the religious justification for expansion. The idea that Russia had a unique destiny as the defender of true Christianity. Without that ideology, Russian political culture develops along different lines, perhaps more European-facing, perhaps less messianic. Perhaps the specific form of autocracy that characterized the Tsars, shaped in part by Byzantine influence filtered through the Third Rome idea, looks quite different. Meanwhile, the relationship between Eastern Orthodoxy and the Catholic West takes a different shape. In our history, the Council of Florence in 1439 had produced a theoretical union of the churches, which was immediately repudiated by the Orthodox faithful after Constantinople fell. In the alternate timeline, that union, or something resembling it, has more time to develop, more political incentive to sustain, and perhaps evolves into a genuine rapprochement rather than a historical footnote. Whether this means a unified Christianity in the West and East, or merely a warmer relationship between two distinct traditions, is impossible to say. But the sectarian geography of the modern world, in which Orthodoxy and Catholicism have spent centuries in mutual suspicion, might look meaningfully different. And that difference would ripple through European politics, through the Ottoman relations with Christian populations, through the entire religious map of the early modern world. Let us pause at the midpoint of our alternate history and survey the landscape. It is the year 1600. 150 years have passed since the siege that changed everything. Constantinople stands. It is not what it once was. The magnificent city of Justinian's day, with its 500,000 inhabitants and its towering Church of Divine Wisdom. But it is a thriving cosmopolitan commercial capital, home perhaps to 200,000 people, a mix of Greeks, Italians, Armenians, Jews, and the occasional Ottoman merchant who trades goods from the East. The Hagia Sophia is still a church. The Byzantine emperor, the dynasty has changed hands once through a complicated marriage alliance with a Hungarian royal family, still sits in the old imperial palace. The Ottoman Empire exists, and it is powerful. But its shape is different. Without the prestige and momentum that the fall of Constantinople provided, Mehmed II's successors pursued expansion in different directions, deeper into Persia, southward through Egypt and Arabia, eventually into North Africa. The Balkans are still contested. A long, grinding frontier war with a Christian coalition led at various times by Hungary, Venice, and the Holy Roman Empire has prevented the kind of rapid Ottoman advance into Central Europe that, in our own history, brought Ottoman armies to the gates of Vienna by 1529. In Western Europe, the Protestant Reformation has still occurred. Luther's challenge to Rome was rooted in theological and institutional dynamics that would have unfolded regardless of events in the East. But its political consequences are somewhat different in a world where Catholic Europe spent the previous century partly unified around the defense of Constantinople. The religious wars that tore the Holy Roman Empire apart in our own history may be less severe, or may be channeled differently by the lingering sense of common purpose that Constantinople's survival created. The Americas are known to Europeans in 1600, but the shape of colonization is different. Portuguese Brazil exists. Spanish presence in the Caribbean is established. But the specific empires carved out in our own history, the breathtaking speed of the conquest of Mexico and Peru, may not have proceeded on the same schedule. The Americas in this alternate 1600 may be less devastated. The indigenous civilizations of Mexico and the Andes facing European contact under slightly different circumstances, with slightly different outcomes. It is a world more multipolar than the one we know. More balanced between East and West, richer in some ways, more contested in others. Now let us take the long view all the way to the present. The most obvious question is whether Constantinople still exists as a Roman or Byzantine state. The honest answer is, probably not in the form it took in the 15th century. Dynasties fall. Empires evolve. The pressures of the modern era, nationalism, industrialization, the collapse of old imperial structures across the 19th and 20th centuries, would have reshaped whatever Byzantine polity survived the medieval period into something unrecognizable to Constantine XI. But the city itself, Istanbul in our world, would almost certainly bear a different name and carry a different symbolic weight. In our timeline, Istanbul is the former capital of an Ottoman Empire that no longer exists, a city whose magnificent Byzantine heritage is preserved but politically subordinate to the Turkish Republic. In the alternate timeline, Constantinople has a different relationship with its own past. It is not the conquered trophy of one civilization or the nostalgic relic of another. It is a city that survived. Its heritage is not a wound, it is a foundation. The Hagia Sophia, perhaps most poignantly of all, is still a church. Or perhaps a museum. Or perhaps, in the complex religious politics of a modern alternate world, a shared sacred space of some kind, its extraordinary dome casting light over a city that never lost the thread of its own story. The Middle East, in this alternate present, looks profoundly different. Without the specific trajectory of Ottoman expansion that followed the fall of Constantinople, the territorial arrangements of the 19th and 20th centuries, the borders drawn by European powers following the First World War, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the mandates that created modern Iraq and Syria and Lebanon, all of these would have different antecedents. The modern political map of the Middle East, already a source of profound instability in our world, might look entirely different in ways that are as likely to be worse as better, because alternate history does not promise improvement, only difference. Russia, without the Third Rome ideology and its centuries of imperial expansionism in that specific form, might be a significantly less powerful state, or a differently powerful one, more integrated with European civilization, less defined by its unique messianic mission. The specific trajectory of Russian autocracy, Russian imperialism, and eventually Soviet communism all have roots that would be disturbed by Constantinople's survival. Europe itself, where so many of the defining conflicts of the modern era were shaped by the aftermath of Ottoman expansion, the Reformation, and the competition between colonial empires, would carry different scars and different strengths. Whether this alternate Europe would be more or less prone to the catastrophic wars of the 20th century is genuinely impossible to say. History does not simplify in that way. Return, 14th, rising over the Bosphorus. The great walls are battered but standing. The defenders, exhausted and outnumbered, are still at their posts. Somewhere in the pre-dawn darkness, a gate is still latched. A commander is still alive. A fleet is still sailing. History will turn on these details. It always does. We are accustomed to thinking of historical events as inevitable, as forces so large, so deeply rooted in economic and demographic and technological change, that the choices of individuals in individual moments could not have altered them. And sometimes that is true. The Industrial Revolution was not going to be stopped by any single decision. The age of European expansion was not going to be prevented by the survival of any one city. But sometimes history really does turn on hinges. Sometimes a gate is left open. Sometimes a commander is wounded at the wrong moment. Sometimes a fleet arrives a day too late. And in those moments, everything, the trajectory of empires, the fate of religions, the shape of the world we are born into, hangs on contingencies so small they are barely visible in the historical record. The fall of Constantinople is one of those moments. We know this because its consequences were so enormous. The end of the Roman Empire, the energizing of the Ottoman advance, the diaspora of scholars that fed the Renaissance, the disruption of trade routes that drove European exploration, the birth of the Third Rome ideology that would shape Russian civilization for centuries. All of this followed from 53 days of siege and one unlocked gate. And so the question this documentary has been asking, what if the walls had held, is not a fantasy. It is a meditation on the nature of history itself. It is a reminder that the world we live in was not inevitable. It was made. It was made by decisions, by accidents, by moments of courage and moments of failure, by individuals who could not have known what their choices would set in motion. Constantine XI, on the morning of his last battle, sent his men to the walls with words of courage. He could not have known that those walls would fall within hours. He could not have known that his death would echo through 5 centuries of history. He was simply a man in an impossible situation trying to hold a line. History is full of such men and women, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes they hold the line. And when they do, the entire future changes. The gates of Constantinople were latched shut for over 1,000 years. On one night in May 1453, they were left open, and the modern world was born from that mistake. Imagine, if you can, the world that might have been born instead.